Hello, welcome to my weekly Cyber Risk Brief update. And in this week's episode, I'll round up what I've been doing this week and inject some news, some current news and current affairs in this roundup. So to start off with, earlier this week, I published my M&A Cyber Brief, and that covered all things security awareness and security culture within the M&A due diligence process. And that's very important because this part of the due diligence, like many others, it seeks to understand and find evidence of maturity of processes, systems, and framework within your target business. So if the security is lax within that business, it gives you an indication of their holistic security posture. So if user awareness is not strong, if they don't have a mechanism in place to make sure that users are trained up to identify and understand risks, understand compliance requirements, understand the tactics that attackers are using to target the business, it is more likely that that business will be susceptible to an attack, or it is easier to social engineer or attack an employee to gain access to that target system. And that, of course, erodes value, investment, and long term, the bottom line of that business that you're buying. So check out that M&A Cyber Risk Brief that I've posted on Wednesday. I'll also attach the link in this description as well. And then I moved on to my newsletter, which talked about SaaS-pocalypse, which is everything to do with SaaS, software as a service, and how AI is eroding the value and revenue, and how businesses and M&A companies can look at leveraging that to get better deals, find better targets, and actually ensure that there's a consistency of bottom line in terms of recurring revenue. And as some people may know, AI is really doing the SaaS model a really bad deal at the moment in terms of the speed to market, the feature they implement, as well as the capability to really fast track value, but also fast track risks within that same frame. So those are the two things in terms of updates. The other aspect I've touched on in the newsletter as well is some acquisitions that really marks a transition or a turning point in where security and the mastery of the tool and the platform of the future is going. So for example, I talked about, and I've also presented a global webinar on this around non-human identities. So these are identities that are not really used by a human as such, except a service account, for example, where an administrator may use a service account to build a system or to run script, for example. So there are other non-human identities such as API keys, API IDs, for example, AWS name records, and also bots and AI agents. They're now becoming the new non-human identities that has a lot of autonomy. And with that, it brings a lot of risks. So I've talked about that in a webinar that I did last year, non-human identities and the risk around that. So to bring it back to this particular point I'm trying to make is that Cisco is buying up companies that are specialists in that area. So the recent acquisition, which was over 400 million, was Asterisk Security. And then another one, which is Sierra, which is CYERA, they've also bought Oasis Security. And these companies have something in common. They're all focusing on non-human identities. And non-human identity layer is one of the fastest growing risks within the SaaS environment and within enterprise, because they're often left unattended, unmonitored, and not secure. So non-human identities is going to be one of the biggest risks of the future as it relates to AI and the proliferation of AI. And that again ties back to M&A deals. How do you ensure that you assess and monitor all the identities within the business that you're buying? And that's not just the human identity, the privileged user, the super admin. You need to go three layers below that, where the platform and the infrastructure relies on all of those identities to interact and interrelate and share data. And there lies a huge gap as it relates to security and blind spot within the M&A due diligence process. That's it for the update for this week. Please remember to follow us on LinkedIn, subscribe to our newsletter, and I'll also add the newsletter QR code here for you to scan to subscribe to my newsletter to get insights, updates, and tips on how to look at your end-to-end M&A deal process and the due diligence aspect. And of course, we are M&A due diligence specialists. So if you're an advisor and your advisor firm, your PE or VC firm, we'd love to speak with you and look at how we could explore potential partnership to help you with your end-to-end deal cybersecurity due diligence. Please reach out to us. The details are up here, sales@pragmatic.com, and our website as well. So have a great weekend. Speak to you soon. Bye.